Growing up during the old internet days was truly a blessing. Not to say that the unrestricted access to it didn't have its dark sides, as I'm sure many of us would like to erase certain things from our memory. I certainly do. But overall, we can all look back positively on the pre-smartphone experience, when it took us 5 hours to type in a long paragraph on that old keyboard, or the pre-app social media portals, when they were only accessible through the browser, and no one ever wanted to use it because shit was just too expensive. We would buy ringtones and games from the back of a magazine. Tech kept getting better and better. You know, everyone started ditching their Nokias and Sony Ericsson's Walkman, and then there was a BlackBerry, and then iPhone, and here we are, you know. Then the era of apps started and we got Instagram and Vine. You see, as a person who was born in the 90s, it wasn't my phone that I held in my hand during my leisure time. It was my beloved PSP. And then later on a PS3 controller.
PS Triple.
I've got my PSP with me still, till this day. It's like a token of growing up, or never growing up. You see, the same way that kids today stay on their phones till very late hours, I stayed up on my little handheld console playing Liberty City Stories at 9 years old. Mum really didn't like it. Understandably so. Our parents didn't really have this sort of access to all these gadgets, and they also had no clue what sort of impact they were going to have on our development.
A study shows children from 0 to 6 spend almost as much time in front of a screen as they do playing outside.
It's gonna damage your eyes. It's gonna make you violent. It will damage your brain. But today, I say, with full confidence, you should play games. And this isn't just an excuse for me wanting to put another 200 hours into 7 Days to Die. I love 7 Days to Die. Maybe a bit. But a thought occurred to me. As I was lying there, phone in my hand, unable to sleep, just doom scrolling, unable to put his goddamn device away, I started vividly remembering the flashbacks of my youngest self hiding under the duvet with my PSP. And even though I seemed to be doing the same thing as I did back in the day, I didn't enjoy it. Yet I couldn't stop. It was like I was held prisoner to my phone. So why is it that I can do presumably the same thing and one makes me feel like crap, whereas the other makes me feel nice? Well, actually, once you look at what the studies show, it turns out gaming and doom scrolling aren't even the same kind of activity. They're just not on the same level. And also the type of game you play matters way more than the total amount of time you spend playing. And trigger warning, I will also be throwing books and reading into the picture, you know? I know you're probably dopamine deprived, so stay with me. Okay, so doom scrolling. The term itself only really blew up during the pandemic because doom scrolling got so bad during COVID. I mean, look at this fucking chart. Holy shit. Anyways, the clearest summary I found is a scope and review published in Mental Health and Digital Technologies in January 2026. Doom scrolling kept showing up linked to higher anxiety, depression, stress, and lower resilience. The mechanism they pointed to was rumination, emotional exhaustion, and what they called intolerance of uncertainty. Too long didn't read. Scrolling makes you feel worse, which we all know already. There's also a 2024 paper that ran the study across 2 countries, Iran and the US. Weird combo, but that's what they did. And they found doom scrolling was linked to existential anxiety. They suggested that scrolling through traumatic content over and over can create something like a secondary PTSD from media exposure. And then there was Harvard Health, and they cited a doctor using the phrase popcorn brain. Had a popcorn lung, now it's time for popcorn brain. You know, vapes and doom scrolling going hand in hand. But it is the real biological phenomenon of feeling like your brain is popping because you're being overstimulated online. There's also another important detail which will become relevant later on in the video, which is that doom scrolling isn't just bad because of the content, it's the format itself that's the problem. It's the infinite scroll, the algorithmic, compulsive engagement loops. It's specifically designed to bypass the part of your brain that decides what to pay attention to. You're not choosing what to consume, you just consume. The feed is choosing it for you. The feed is feeding you. Holy shit. I'm sure many of us have already fallen victim to feeling like shit because of the doom scrolling. So let's move on to the gaming part. So the Oxford Internet Institute ran a study with 39,000 gamers. They published it in the Journal of Royal Society Open Science in 2022. They worked directly with 7 game companies to get actual play data instead of self-reported, which is a very, very big deal. Self-reporting has too many liars. I know you spend thousands of hours playing League of Legends, bad boy, and I know that many of these hours you were not happy. But yes, the finding was, and I'm quoting, little to no evidence for a causal connection between gameplay and well-being. So I guess gaming isn't necessarily good. It's more like gaming is neutral. But here's where it gets interesting. The same group and the same lead researcher, Andrew Przybylski, published a follow-up in 2025 with a slightly different angle. They tracked 703 casual Nintendo Switch players across over 140,000 hours of playtime across 150 number of games. And what they found was that the number of hours played didn't really predict the mental well-being, but the perceived value of the games, whether the player felt the game was meaningful to them, that did predict it, which I think is pretty sick and good for us, because the amount of time you spend doesn't really matter as long as you play good games. You hear that, League of Legends players? What matters is whether you're getting something out of it, you know, emotionally, which is the exact opposite of doom scrolling, because no one finishes 2 hours of TikTok and thinks, wow, that was so meaningful to me. But you can absolutely finish a shorter game in a day and be like, wow, this was amazing. To the Moon, Dark Side Detective, Papers, Please. There's so many great short games that made an impact on me. And I can't even tell you what I watched yesterday on TikTok. And there was an earlier Oxford paper from 2021. They used actual playtime data from Animal Crossing New Horizons and Plant vs. Zombies, surveyed over 3,000 players, and found that time spent playing was actually positively associated with well-being. They suggested that competence, feeling like you're getting good at something, and social connection through play were doing most of the work. So putting all this together, the strongest version of the gaming is good for you claim is that actually gaming is good for you when you are engaged with it and when you're getting something out of it, which is true for most hobbies. And doom scrolling is not a hobby. If someone came up to me and said, watching TikTok is my hobby, I'd put them in a mental institution. But yes, now that we know doom scrolling is a behavior that the research has now consistently linked to worse mental health outcomes, and gaming is a behavior that the research has linked to either neutral or positive outcomes, there's another thing that just kind of beats both of them. It is reading. However, it can be bad reading too. So is reading actually that good for you? There's a 2024 meta-analysis covering 49 studies that found something researchers call the screen inferiority effect. Students reading on paper consistently scored higher on the comprehension test than students reading the same material on screens. Then going back further, there's also a 2020 JAMA pediatric study that did brain MRIs on preschool age kids, and the research found that the kids with high passive screen time had lower structural integrity in the white matter tract that connects language and literacy centers in the brain. Basically, kids who read books with their caregivers had the opposite. They had strong white matter. So basically, reading is the cognitive gold standard. But, as I said before, not all reading is good. There's a cognitive neuroscientist at UCLA named Marianne Wolf. That's a cool name. She actually wrote a book called Reader Come Home about the topic, and her work distinguishes between two completely different types of reading. So the first one she calls deep reading. This is the slow, immersive engagement with text where comprehension turns into empathy, critical thought, and original insight. Your brain is doing what she calls perspective taking, which means actively constructing what other people are thinking and feeling. Then the second is what she calls skim reading. And in her words, when we skim, we literally, physiologically, don't have time to think. Wolf's argument is that more time you spend on skimming, the worse your brain gets at deep reading. The reading brain shifts towards non-linear processing, you know, looking around the page and looking for keywords and never settling. Now I'm starting to think if there's a correlation between people actually having ADHD or are we just cooked?
They've been diagnosed with mental disorders, but then when we do the electronic fast, a lot of their symptoms go away and they don't need medication.
There's gotta be another video on the topic. But yeah, if that pattern sounds familiar, it should, because it's basically doom scrolling of the reading world. It's different content but very similar cognitive patterns. So yes, reading on Reddit is actually bad. I'm so sorry. Here's one thing I didn't expect though. So the screen inferiority effect mostly only shows up for informational and expository texts, like textbooks and news articles and study materials. For narrative texts, like stories and novels, multiple meta-analyses have shown that basically there's no difference between screen and paper. So if you read a novel on iPad, that's functionally the same as reading it on paper. But if you read a news article on your phone, you comprehend the words in the same article printed out. But it doesn't matter, I'm here to defend gaming, not reading. Everyone knows reading is good for you. And gaming, depending on the genre, can actually be way closer to reading on this imaginary axis that we made than it is to scrolling. Like an RPG with a 60-hour story. You're holding so many things and plot threads and characters, and you have to track lore and remembering locations and your little quests. You know, there's a very similar cognitive workload to reading a novel. It's not identical, but it's definitely in the same area, I'd say. And I'm not saying that playing Persona 5 or Baldur's Gate is the same as, I don't know, reading a book. it's better. I'm joking. I'm just saying it's not the same as scrolling on TikTok either. And I feel like our parents nowadays, after giving us years worth of nagging about us playing video games at night, they're there scrolling on Facebook. They're doing worse than us. Gamers rise up for real. But the same way that there's superior and inferior reading, there's superior and inferior gaming. The genre you're playing actually changes which part of your brain is getting trained. So for example, action games, first-person shooters, and fast-paced stuff. There's a 2023 meta-analysis published in Technology, Mind and Behavior, APA journal, and they found that the strongest cognitive benefits from action games is in something called top-down attention. That's the ability to deliberately focus on what you choose instead of being distracted by random stimuli. Which makes sense. If you're playing a shooter, you're constantly choosing what to focus on whilst the game throws stuff at you. So it's kind of like training your attention control. There's also another research showing that action gaming directly correlates with faster attention speed and better visual spatial ability. Basically, the ability to track objects in space. It's basically the opposite of doom scrolling does to you. Scrolling trains your brain to react to the next thing that you're gonna see. And from what I understand, action games train your brain to choose where you want to look. Next up, strategy games like real-time strategy and turn-based and that sort of thing. So the research here is honestly kind of crazy because training studies on real-time strategy games have shown improvements in working memory, executive function, and reasoning abilities, even in older adults. And playing strategy games has been linked to measurable changes in brain structure. But since the effects are modest, don't just jump into a strategy game and spend your entire life on it, okay? Next up, puzzle games. So Tetris, Portal, stuff like that. And also before we move on, I just realized that if action games and real-time strategy games are on top, then League of Legends is actually helping your brain. I don't know about the feel-good aspect though. Yes, anyways, puzzle games. So there's a 2019 study comparing action and puzzle game players, and they found puzzle gamers had better sustained attention and executive function, whilst action gamers had better response speed, because, you know, different mechanics train different things. Puzzle games, you sit with the problem, action games, you focus and, you know, react and respond. Then narrative and RPG and story-driven games. So this one isn't really well studied because it's really difficult to put a measure on this game made me feel things. But this is where you get into the Oxford research on motivation and engagement, the perceived value finding I talked about earlier. Basically, story-driven games tend to score really well on that emotional axis. They're not really training attention speed and stuff like that. They're doing something else, which is basically narrative processing and empathy and the same stuff that novels do. So maybe RPGs are superior if you think about it that way. If they're the most similar ones to books, we could be onto something. Can someone do a study on this? And then last but not least, there's the cozy games. And they're the ones that get the most of the video games are good for mental health press. And actually research backs it up, so I can't even say anything. And I love cozy games. Maybe this is why I'm such a good, healthy individual. So the 2021 Oxford paper I mentioned earlier specifically used Animal Crossing data. Multiple studies have shown cozy games like Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley can be beneficial for reducing stress and improving mental well-being. And the design elements of pace control and low stakes and predictable rewards and basically just very relaxing environment, they function very similar to mindfulness practice. So basically, Stardew Valley is like meditating. So the takeaway from all of this is that gaming isn't just this one thing. If you want focus and reaction speed, action games. If you want problem solving and working memory, strategy and puzzles. If you want stress reduction and emotional regulation, then cozy games. And if you want to feel things and have a story you'll remember in 5 years, kind of read a book but not really, then RPGs. And there's no version of doom scrolling that has corresponding benefits, at least as of today. There's no, if you scroll down the right kind of feed, it actually improves your working memory. It's not a thing. Also, I have to do this part because if I don't, the comments will, and the comments will be very mean. So we can't really say, play this game, your life will improve with the precision that a clinical trial would. The Oxford studies are the strongest because they use actual play data and large samples. Second, the cognitive benefits I just talked about, like attention speed and working memory, those are measurable in lab tests. So whether they actually translate to the real world stuff, like, I don't know, make you better at your job or a better student, there's not that much evidence there, okay? So take that as you will. And then last one, none of this applies to problematic and compulsive gaming. There's a real distinction in the literature between gaming engagement and gaming addiction, okay? When someone shifts from healthy engagement to compulsive use, the mental health correlations flip and you'll start seeing, depression, anxiety, and stress, and the benefits that I've been talking about, they probably wouldn't be there. So yes, I don't know who needs to hear it, but Just making sure that you know that 16 hours a day of any of this stuff is going to be bad for you, okay? No, you're literally just wasting away your life. And please take a shower. However, even after all this, one type of evidence says this thing is consistently linked towards mental health, and the other one says this thing is linked to either neutral or positive outcomes, depending on how you engage with it. You don't really need to think about which one you should be doing when you've got an hour to kill. If you rank these activities by how much actual benefit you get from an hour of doing them, it looks something like reading a real book, nice, sustained, engaged gaming, and then there's doom scrolling, buried at the bottom, doing measurable damage to your stress levels and your attention span. And the point of this video isn't like, oh, delete TikTok, delete Instagram, you know, don't watch YouTube shorts, read a book, stop whatever you're doing, spend 10 hours playing Portal, even though, not gonna lie, great idea. The point is that when we put all of these activities into screen time, we're losing what's a really meaningful distinction between things that can be training your brain and things that are mining your brain for dopamine. So just slow down is the landing. I'm pretty sure there's also a similar correlation between long form content and short form content. So if you have watched this video, thank you so much for your support, because I know this shit's hard, okay? You did well, you did well. Now go reward yourself with a little game, a little doom scroll perhaps. No, don't do that. Anyways, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video. I don't know what video I should be doing next, so how about you drop me something in the comments below, like a suggestion. I don't know. Goodbye.